What is up, guys? If you watched last weekend's Apex card, UFC Vegas 110, you may have seen Isaac Dulgarian versus Yider Del Valle, and that fight has sparked some controversy. And it might have sparked more than controversy, it might have sparked an FBI investigation into what could be one of the bigger sports betting scandals of recent times. Now, we remember what happened with the Matthew Boyer and Shohei Ohtani situation. We could be looking at something similar to that. Now, right before this fight took place, you've most likely heard, but there was some very, very interesting line movement. Now, if you don't really understand betting or odds, you really wouldn't understand how drastic this is. But if you watch my channel, I do like to bet on fights, and I like to have action on some of these fights. And Billy Walters even said it himself. If anybody wants a fair contest, a fair sport, a fair ball game, a fair fight with nothing, intervening in that, no fixing, no rigging, the people who are going to identify where things are rigged and the people who want to avoid things being rigged most of the times are the normal sports bettor. People who, deal with this type of business and people who take part in activities like what we saw on Saturday night, it's just definitely not something we want to get behind. But, you hate to see people doing things like this, which could possibly affect, the everyday user who wants to just do it for fun, like you and me, preventing them from even being able to do it. Now, right before this fight occurred, Isaac Dulgarian was, opened up minus 240, got to around a minus 275 favorite, stayed about that way the entirety of the week. Right before the fight, he got bet down all the way to a minus 127 favorite, all the way down. This took place within an hour. I don't care if Billy Walters himself walked into Circa Sportsbook and put his net worth on Del Valle. Normally, you're not going to see line movement like that. It's very obscure. And for it to happen over the blink of an eye, that tends to just not occur, especially when it's $1.50 going in the way of the underdog. You'll see line movement before fights. I think back to Khalil Roundtree versus Jamal Hill. He was like minus 125 before the fight, ended up being plus 110 by the time the fight was getting announced. And you think back to like maybe Khamzat Chimaev, Dricus du Plessis. Khamzat was maybe minus 250 the majority of the week, got up to about minus 280, 290 right before the fight. But, these are like 50 cents line movement changes. That's not anything nearly as drastic as what we saw, especially in terms of the first round finish prop, where that went down from plus 700, which was, a day or two before the fight, a reasonable line, all the way down to plus 475 right before the fight. You do not see that type of line movement with prop bets ever in the sport of MMA. That's a very niche market. You think about football spreads. That's the most, highly liquidated market in all of sports betting. That line's never really going to move unless there's something serious happening. You're normally not going to see a ton of line movement just because so many people are betting it. Not many people bet props in MMA compared to other sports. It's just a very niche market. Not many people watch the UFC. Not many people are watching an Apex Fight Night. Not many people are placing serious money on round props in an Apex Fight Night. It's just not something that occurs. And when you're getting that drastic of a line movement an hour before a fight like that, and James Krause used to coach Isaac Dulgarian. It's basically the exact same situation as the James Krause scandal that happened a few years back. Like I said, I definitely think we're going to see more come out about this. In terms of the line movement for the first round finish prop being so crazy, even before the fight, FanDuel and other major sports books, DraftKings, they all closed the prop market right before the fight even occurred. You could not, get any action on any props on those sports books, which is just a major red flag. You never really see that occur. Sports books very rarely ever, close their markets like that. And two major players in the game, Caesars and William Hill, two gigantic entities, they are giving refunds to anybody who had losing bets on the Dulgarian side. So that's definitely good. Sports betting companies normally are absolutely devilish. They'll never give you your money back even when you deserve it. So it's good to see them actually doing right by the customer there. And more has been coming out. We've seen Ariel talking about it. We've seen people on Twitter going on about it. We don't know how reputable of a source it could be, but we've been hearing about, as investigations further, more and more UFC fighters are starting to get investigated, looked into. Referees, Jason Herzog, I've heard, is now being looked up under the microscope. You think back to that Henry Cejudo situation with Song Yadong. You think back to that early stoppage, Nasruddin Imavov versus Jared Cannonier. Very, very interesting circumstances. And, supposedly federal regulators have flagged over 100 potential UFC fights that have been abnormal in terms of the betting patterns. And you also think back to all of these stoppages that are getting called and then called back. Jake Matthews versus Neil Magny, Matt Favola, Kyle Nelson. Have we really ever seen this amount of mistakes being made by referees, which are seriously swinging the impact of a fight? Even last night, Antidalia versus Waldo Cortez Acosta. The fight realistically should have been a no contest because there was no timer, no 5-minute timer. Like in the Cejudo versus Song Yadong fight, we've been seeing some very weird abnormalities, happen in the, sports betting space in MMA. And just with the refereeing, the scorecards, you think back to Usman Nurmagomedov versus Paul Hughes. We know the Abu Dhabi judges tend to cook the scorecards, but these are judges that tend to operate in Vegas, in New York, for these other sanctioning bodies. It's the sanctioning bodies that actually hire these judges. We need to investigate these judges. We need to investigate these referees. I feel like the judging has been quite obvious for a long time. I mean, you even look back to Dulgarian's last fight where he lost versus Christian Rodriguez, where he really should have won that. You look at the people that were judging that fight, very suspicious. And like I said, I just think we're going to see a lot of things come out. I think this is really just the tip of the iceberg. I think it's going to be a similar situation to, the Otani and Matthew Boyer situation, where offshore sports books are involved, bookies are involved. I think that there's definitely going to be a lot to unravel. Maybe James Krause never really took his foot off the gas. Maybe he's just been doing it in the shadows. But, definitely an interesting story. I love the sports betting side of MMA. Definitely something that interests me. And I even did check the lines right before, the fight. And I said, how is Dulgarian minus 160? I mean, that's absolutely crazy. But to go down to minus 125, there's clearly something, cooking the books there. Supposedly some big, whale bettors went into the Hard Rock Casino down in Florida, placed some big money on Yair Deville to win in round one. And then just to talk about the performance as well, Dulgarian, we know how proficient of a wrestler that he is. He goes out there, shoots the takedown. He's completely in on it. And, if you actually grapple, if you actually train, this is like if you're going with someone who's a way better wrestler than you, and they're kind of just letting you get decent work in with your takedown defense. They'll get in on the hips, but they'll kind of like let it go. They'll kind of let you, stuff the head, get the whizzer. They'll kind of let you work a little bit. It looked like what Dulgarian was doing. A wrestler of his caliber should be able to finish that shot every day of the week. He was completely in. Yair Deville was bent over like a fucking, sack of potatoes over the shoulder. And Dulgarian did not finish the takedown, looked weak, looked frail, got, shrugged off, his back taken. And then, look, I know that sometimes it is going to be very difficult to fight off a rear naked choke, and you can get finished by that. It's a very common, submission to get in MMA, but it tends to happen when guys are severely tired or severely hurt on the feet beforehand, and they're already compromised. Dulgarian was not already compromised from what we saw in the fight, so there was really no reason for him to, get submitted so easily. We know his caliber of grappling, and also making just absolute day one amateur white belt mistakes that people who have taken a week of jiu-jitsu know how to do. You fight the hands to be able to defend the rear naked choke. And he just wasn't doing anything that was just at a day one level, fighting the hands, turning into them. Just completely punching the face like an idiot, gripping at the neck. It looked like a show. And if you know ball, you know that looked very, very suspicious. And I was just watching the fight. I was like, is Dulgarian like drunk? Is he just completely out of it? Is he sick? Does he have swine flu? Does he have staph infection coming out of his ears? Like, I don't know what's wrong with him. But, you know, then that makes you speculate what really went down. Do we think that it was Dulgarian cooking the fight? Maybe he was in connection to possibly someone in association with James Krause or a character like that, where they're able to get major action against him to be able to give him a cut of the money, because there would be no reason that he would be doing this for any small amount of chump change. You think about, you know, just going on a sports book, even if you go on, say, Bet Online, for example, most people's accounts are not going to be able to put over, you know, a couple grand on a prop like that. It's going to take someone with some serious, you know, ability to get action on a round prop like that to be able to even place a sizable bet like that in the first place. So very suspicious. You know, it's going to get connected. The dots are going to get connected. I think we will definitely see in the coming weeks, coming months. But something that definitely interests me, possibly it could be an injury, you know, on the Dulgarian side. But for something to be that drastic, you'd even think that someone would have found out about it and leaked that information earlier in the week, maybe not right before, you know, as he's hitting mitts, before he walks out. It's like this dude, you know, had a seizure or something in the back right before he walked out. That's the type of, you know, crazy medical injury influence on the fight that would, you know, cause such an insane significant line movement change and such a crazy narrative and expectation of the fight for the fight outcome, especially for the fight to end in round one. Very suspicious. Maybe Dulgarian had a seizure beforehand and someone knew that he was just going to get absolutely cooked in the back. They leaked it to their friend. Or maybe Dulgarian, he's in connection with some shady individuals, up to, you know, some shady things in terms of the sports betting world. It's definitely going to unravel very shortly, but I just wanted to give my thoughts on it. Very, very interesting. I'm definitely leaning towards Dulgarian being in connection with people, you know, being able to place major bets against him. He's trying to get a cut of it, but there's always going to be a paper trail. I don't think he's going to get away with it. He's already been cut from the UFC, so they've already gotten rid of him. They've released an official statement talking about it. They're gaming partners that, you know, have the federal regulations surrounding gambling on MMA. They've investigated it. They've gotten rid of him, which I'm glad to see. Cannot be having that in our sport whatsoever. Yair Deville, it's unfortunate. I think he's definitely a good prospect, but you're definitely going to have to take this win with a very large grain of salt for him. But if you guys enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and have a great rest of your day.